Life seems so out of control right now. Those in power are arguing with one another, being criticized by those around them for responding too strongly or not strong enough. Chaos is seemingly unstoppable. It's in a time where the power of money, the wonder of medicine, the glow of pop culture, media, and athletic fame all seem to have lost their power. Many of us feel quite powerless. So, what better time to be a Christian? Resting in the wonder that God is all powerful. What does it mean that God is all powerful? It means that whatever God decides to do cannot be stopped, and whatever he intends to stop cannot happen. Whatever God decides to do cannot be stopped, and whatever he intends to stop cannot happen. God oversees the world with supreme authority and unmatched power. Isaiah 40:15-26 tells us about the power of God. Behold, the nations are like a drop from a bucket, and are accounted as the dust on the scales. Behold, he takes up the coastlands like fine dust. All the nations are as nothing before him. They are accounted by him as less than nothing and emptiness. To whom then will you liken God, or what likeness compare with him? Do you not know? Do you not hear? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them like a tent to dwell in, who brings princes to nothing and makes the rulers of the earth as emptiness. Scarcely are they planted, scarcely sown, scarcely has their stem taken root in the earth when he blows on them, and they wither, and the tempest carries them off like a stubble. To whom then will you compare me, that I should be like him, says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes on high and see, who created these? He who brings out their host by number, calling them all by name, by the greatness of his might, and because he is strong in power, not one is missing. Talk about someone with power. All the nations are as a drop in the bucket to God. It doesn't say each nation is a drop in the bucket, as in when you put all the nations together, there would be a little bit of water in the bottom of the bucket. It's saying that all of the nations of the world put together are simply one drop in the bucket. All the great powers we see in the news, China, Russia, Great Britain, our own country, are just one little drop in the bucket. Specks of dust on a scale. Yet how often do we look to these powers for deliverance or are in dismay when our government is not operating properly? We oftentimes act as if our leaders and we ourselves hold some great degree of power. Yet all power is granted for only a time by the one who holds every ounce of power. It's God who raises up kings and brings them down. So why do we shake with anxiety when we are the children of the most powerful being in the universe? First, we are shaken by things much smaller than God because they are visible to us. It's not because God is less impressive, but because he is more powerful. My dog, who's a very little tiny dog, whenever he sees something that he's afraid of, barks and barks and barks because he wants you to think that he's bigger than he is. People who don't have great power need to impress you with the appearance of great power. But God, who is all powerful, simply whispers. God so often whispers because the whispers of God are louder and more powerful than the shouts of men on their platforms or the blare of TVs and devices. Think of the millions upon millions of people over thousands of years who have heard the whisper of God and had their lives completely transformed by his voice. That is power. They heard the whisper, and when there were noise, it was just noise. It wasn't just noise, but testimony to God's great power. So it isn't that we can't hear God's power. We fail to see it because our eyes are fixed on other things that are all living in submission to his power. How often we find ourselves seeing the Goliaths of our day the way the nation of Israel did, trembling and in fear, when we should see them the way the little shepherd boy David did, as small little specks standing in the shadow of God's power. We see God's power all around us, budding leaves, growing plants, babies and animals being born day after day, a sun that rises and sets like clockwork, empires that are rising and falling. Yet oftentimes, instead of walking into the wonder God invites us to, we sit in the mire of being in awe of lesser things. Secondly, we miss the power of God because we attribute happenings in the world to chance and happenstance, or our own ingenuity, rather than the divine enabling of God's powerful hand. We see ourselves as stopping evil, curing disease. We see us as bringing about good, rather than realizing any good the world has is brought through the hand of God. In short, we have come to worship our small ant-like ability, when above us, all around us, resides the King of Kings, a lion, a warrior, and a savior. We would do well to remember that all great things in the Bible were done by men totally dependent on the power of God. We would also do well to remember the stories of God's power. God brought cities down at the sound of a trumpet, split seas in half, ended armies with a whisper, crumbled nations in a night, healed the lame, the blind, and the sick, raised the dead. Perhaps nothing displays God's power more than how our world begins and ends. The Lord spoke the world into existence. Just a sentence, and our trees and our mountains and our oceans, even ourselves, existed. And when the end of the world comes, God will speak just a word, and all the armies of the world will be defeated. He speaks, and it's over. That is power. One story, perhaps more than any other, reminds us of the power of God. It's a story of a small group of disciples stuck in the middle of a storm-tossed lake in a little tiny boat, desperately crying to the Savior, "Help us, Lord, don't you see that we are perishing?" And Jesus simply rises from his sleep, rebukes the wind and the waves, and everything goes silent. And he looks and he says, "Why did you doubt?" So in the midst of our time of trouble and the storm that we feel tossed in, we often cry, "Help us, Lord, for we are perishing." And God whispers, "Why do you doubt? Have you not known? Have you not heard? Look up, look up. I am in control."